Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, I'm GC Smith, and welcome to the second day of the official Eldritch Moon spoiler season. We have some very interesting cards to take a look at today, including the 5 intro pack rares and 2 common versions of old cards, or modern versions, redos of old cards. But before we get to any of that, we're going to be starting off today with 2 cards that were spoilt late last night after I actually did my video and uploaded it. And we're going to be starting with the first of these in Unsubstantiate. 1 in a blue for a uncommon instant with return target spell creature to its owner's hand. Now this card is incredibly exciting to see because 1, it means blue are getting something kind of cool and neat and interesting here, and B, this card is absolutely powerful. Now don't get me wrong, it's not going to see play in a harder control deck. This is a pure tempo card, pure and simple, because it's literally in a lot of cases a time walk. Decks like Bant Company, Blue-White Humans, and Blue-Red Fevered Visions are the kind of decks that really want this effect in their deck. In the Humans and Bant Company, this is just used to counter either opposing collected companies, or languishes, or opposing huge plays like Planeswalkers. It just returns them to the hand for 1 turn, because often all you need is 1 extra turn just to get a bit more damage in. Getting back a secure the waste to your opponent's hand is also something else that's incredibly powerful. You know, there's just so many ways Unsubstantiate will tear open games, but it really needs to be an aggressive deck or a tempo deck to absolutely get the full value from this card. Hard control decks never want to 1 for 0 themselves, because you're going to be using this to hit a card. If you run it in a hard control deck, you'd be using it to bounce a card back to their hand, or stopping a spell, and then next turn they'll just cast that spell again, and you have 1 less card to deal with it. You know, this card really isn't good in a hard control deck. Maybe if it was like Remand and replaced itself, it would be nice, because sometimes then you don't mind not hard answering it for a turn to set up, say, an extra Planeswalker, or just survive an extra turn to get to your Wrath. But yeah, no, this is definitely going to be see play in a more aggressive tempo-based decks than it will be in control. But it's still an absolutely amazing card, and has some of the best flavor text I've ever seen. Nicely done, Jace. You always were good at disappearing acts. Liliana Vess. I don't know if I said Lysiana. No, Liliana Vess. I love her sarcasm here, having a go at him for like just always walking away for his own interests. Not that she's much different, my ad. So it's a bit more of a pot calling the kettle black in some ways. I absolutely love this card, and I think it will look gorgeous in foil, especially since people are talking about it seeing play in Modern, where it could be quite interesting. I know Modern has Remand, but there's a lot of decks where you might just want to be able to counter things like Abrupt Decay for a turn. I don't know, Jeskai Sensi Combo seems like such a deck. Then we have our second card that was spoiled yesterday, Phalos Lancers. 3 white for a rare 4/4 human knight creature with first strike, and when Phalos Lancers enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a legendary card, reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Boy, this is a really good card for Commander. A 5-mana 4/4 first striker is going to be good in, say, draft or limited. You know, it's just such a powerful body. So this is definitely see a lot of play in limited, and if you hit legendary stuff to tutor, then it's even more of a bomb in limited. But its real shining area is going to be in Commander, where it's the fact that it tutors a legendary card is extremely relevant. Not even just a legendary creature. This can fetch you any legendary land, artifact, creature. I don't know if there's legendary enchantments. I think there are, but they're mostly like Kamigawa block style things. But even then, it just allows you to fetch so many nice, interesting pieces from your deck, not least of which Bruna or Gisela, to allow you to build Bracella, Voice of Nightmares in your commander deck. You know, if you have 1 as your commander, then you use Phalos Lancers to fetch the other one. Most likely you'd have something like Gisela as your commander, because it allows you to bring back Bruna to your battlefield. I absolutely love this card for Commander purposes, and it's going to be a card that you probably want to pick up in foil at some point, because I know a lot of Commander players love foils. So that's the cards from yesterday out of the way. We're going to be going on to today's cards, and starting with the commons. Now there are 2 commons spoilt today, both of which are references to old cards. And the first of these is Galvanic Bombardment, a single red for a common instant that reads, Galvanic Bombardment deals X damage to target creature, where X is 2 plus the number of cards named Galvanic Bombardment in your graveyard. This is a modern take on a card like Flameburst or Kindle, both of which were 2-mana spells at instant that did the same kind of effect but could also hit players and included both graveyards. So if you had an opponent that had 4 Flamebursts in their graveyard, you'd deal you deal 2 plus 4, so that's 6. Yeah, you deal 6 damage to your opponent or one of their creatures. Now, Galvanic Bombardment isn't quite as powerful in the top end, in the sense of it can't get as high as, say, 7, 8, 9. But what this can do is incredibly powerful removal game that ramps up as the game goes on. You know, early game, this removes a 2 toughness creature, but then as the game goes on, further versions can hit 3, 4, and 5 toughness creatures, and that's maybe sometimes all you need to really push through damage in various formats. I know this card is probably going to see a lot of standard play as well, because Shock normally has done in some ways. There's just normally a lot of 2 toughness creatures you want to hit, and this might do a lot to get a red aggro deck back onto the map. Its big problem has been dealing with all the creatures that the white aggro decks have, that just grow really quickly beyond anything red can deal with. This is really good in early game, like killing creatures, and then can even get as high as killing off Archangel of Tithes, which is another big issue for those decks. I think this card is definitely going to see a lot of play in standard, and I'm really excited to see this kind of effect at common. The other common card we're going to be taking a look at today is Take Inventory. 1 and a blue for a sorcery common with draw a card, then draw cards equal to number of cards named Take Inventory in your graveyard. For those of you who either have played Magic for a while or bought the Kiora versus Elspeth dual deck when that was out, this is a standard version of Accumulated Knowledge. Accumulated Knowledge did have a couple of differences. It did count both graveyards like the previous cards in the red I mentioned, as well as being an instant. That said, Take Inventory is a card I'm very interested to play around with. I know we have Anticipate in the format, which is instant, and sometimes is just often a lot better in your deck in some situations, but I do feel that if your aim is to get the game to go on long, Take Inventory is far more powerful in the mirror, as well as being far more powerful overall at the top end than Anticipate can ever be. I mean, people are already taking turns off to cast Read the Bones, and while I know Read the Bones has a far more powerful card advantage, especially in the early game, this one doesn't cost life and allows you to play a tap land on turn 3 as well. And with Thalia forcing all dual lands to enter the battlefield tapped anyway, I think Take Advantage could end up seeing some standard play. Obviously, you can't play this ever as a 1, 2, or even just a 3 of. It has to be a 4 of, in my opinion. And I do wish this was an instant, a bit like Accumulated Knowledge, especially since the red versions both kept their instant speed. Or the red version kept its instant speed from its past versions. But I still absolutely love this card. I definitely want to see this C play again. I just love both of these effects, and they're both incredibly powerful in draft. It reminds me of the origin cycle of commons that just got more powerful than what you drafted these. And this is very much along that line, except it's a spell, and it's so good in like just card advantage for blue, and so nice to see blue actually getting good spells for once when they're not afraid that Jace will ruin the format. You know, Jace being like the poster boy for blue for a while. I was like, oh, we don't want to get blue because they've got Jace, but then blue doesn't get anything because Jace sucks now. Yeah, it's very interesting to see. I'm just so glad to see this. Now, moving on then from the commons to the uncommons, we actually have 4 uncommon cards today, or actually no, because 2 of them are transformed. Yeah, so 3 uncommons today because of the fact they transform 2 of them. And we're going to be starting off with Lone Rider. 1 and a white, a 1/1 human knight creature at uncommon with First Strike and Lifelink. So a 1/1 with First Strike and Lifelink, quite interesting in some ways, except it also reads, at the beginning of your end step, if you gained 3 or more life this turn, transform Lone Rider. This is basically suggesting to me that there's going to be a black-white life gain deck like there has been in past draft formats. But what does it transform into? Well, it transforms into It That Rides as 1. A 4/4 Eldrazi horror creature with First Strike, Trample and Lifelink, as the rider and the horse have fused together. And boy, there's some great flavoured text on both of these cards, both sides of this card, sorry. On the front side, horse and rider are often of one mind, but until this morning I'd never seen them be of one body. Oh, I love this, like the rider riding along, and then as Emrakul appears, which, by the way, the tentacles of Emrakul can be seen in the background, like big tendrils from the sky. Yeah, I absolutely love the artwork of this card, even if I don't think it's necessarily hugely powerful. That said, though, it does fit in a couple of draft archetypes, because this with pump spells is also really, really good. And the fact that it can become a 4/4 for 2 mana with First Strike Trample and Lifelink is incredibly powerful as well. Next up we have Grizzly Angler. 2 and a blue for a 2/3 human creature with tap, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then, if there is a colourless creature card in your graveyard, transform Grizzly Angler. And what does it turn into? Or it turns into Grizzly Anglerfish. Creature, Eldrazi Fish, and it's a 4/5 with 6 mana. Creatures your opponents control attack this turn if able. I love the flavour of this card being he's fished up something that kind of either consumes him, or it basically fishes up the Grizzly Angler and gives you an angler that has eaten or gives him the angler fish that has eaten the angler, I guess, is the flavour when it flips. But anyway, that's such a sweet card, especially since it actually has the Anglerfish lure ability. It's such a flavour home run. I really love this card. It's so good, and I love the artwork as well. This is going to be an incredibly powerful card in blue-based limited decks. It's a 3 mana 2/3, which is incredibly good. Turns into a 4/5 very quickly, I imagine, if you manage to get a couple of colourless cards on your deck. And yeah, if it does transform, it's huge. If it doesn't, well, you can always use it in the blue-green emerge archetype, which we're going to come to another card in a second for it. But yeah, this is such a sweet card. So what was that other card I was talking about just a second ago? The other card we're turning to for the blue-green emerge deck? Well, it's Influence of Emrakul. 2 green for an enchantment at uncommon with whenever you cast a Eldrazi creatures card with converted mana cost 7 or more, draw 2 cards. Now, at first glance, when I first saw this, I was like, oh, this is going to suck in Shadows of Innistrad because we're not going to have that many Eldrazi cards. Except Emerge is a thing, and we've already seen the 1 Emerge card at 7 CMC with the ability to pay 5 and a blue, so cast it for 6 with Emerge. You know, this is such a sweet card because it really fuels the Emerge deck, and plus the artwork of it is Chandra, Gideon and Jace and Nissa fighting off a horde of Eldrazified humans or people or creatures of Innistrad. Yeah, this is absolutely great. I love this card. I don't know, it's so interesting, but it definitely will go really well as a great payout card in the Emerge deck. Imagine emerging into that Griffin, I can't remember what it was, creature type from yesterday, and drawing 3 cards as a result. That's going to be absolutely amazing card advantage. That said, though, it's probably not going to be that great outside of that archetype. I'm not so sure, really. 7 is going to be a lot to hit in this format, I think. So now that the uncommons are out of the way, it's time to move on to the rares, and we have 6 of them today. 5 are obviously the starter pack rares I've already mentioned, and 1 interesting rare we'll come to last. So first up, we're going to be going, I guess, in Wooburg order for the intro pack rares. So we'll be starting with Sanctify of Souls. 3 and a white for a 2/3 human cleric with whenever another creature enters a battlefield under your control, Sanctify of Souls gets +1/+1 until end of turn. For 2 and a white, exile a creature card from your graveyard, and you put a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying onto the battlefield. Basically, it's a 4 mana 2/3 that occasionally gets pumped when you play other creatures. Is probably going to see play in a great token strategy because this just keeps getting bigger. You know, the more tokens you play in a turn, sorry, the more creatures you play in a turn, which is easier with token generation, this is going to be bigger, and it helps create tokens as well. It's a pretty interesting card. I mean, I like it, even ignoring the first ability. I absolutely love it for the ability to poop out spirits later in the game, as it just gives you something to do with both your mana and your previously dead creatures to create an evasive battlefield. I really like this rare as a limited perspective, but from constructed playability, I think it's just a little too slow and too underpowered. But then again, intro pack rares most likely are. Next up, we come to Niblet of Frost, 2 blue for a 3/3 flying creature, which is already absolutely amazing when it comes to limited playability. Obviously, it's a rare, so it's got to have a little bit more than that. And first up, it also has Prowess, which again is amazing in a limited archetype, especially if you get to have a lot of cards like Galvanic Bombardment and take inventory. But it also has, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, tap target creature an opponent controls, that creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. This is a huge bomb, like stupidly huge bomb, and will definitely be a first pick if you want to get into that strategy, or at least just to take out the format. It's going to be incredibly hard to remove, I reckon. We've not seen much in the way of removal in the format currently. Unless, of course, we get a card I'm predicting will be in the set, but I don't want to mention that here now. But yeah, this is such a huge bomb in Limited. It's going to be absolute wrecking your opponents if you manage to get into this archetype. It's evasive, it hits quickly and hard, and it just takes out your opponent's attackers, so it's also very defensive as well. Huge tempo card, absolutely amazing. Yeah, just a huge Limited bomb. Next up, we come up to Newsgraph Mob. 4 black for a zombie creature, and it's a 0/0, except it enters the battlefield with 5 1/1 counters on it, and whenever a player casts a spell, remove a 1/1 counter from Newsgraph Mob. If you do, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. So basically, it's a 5/5 that creates 10 power for 6 mana eventually, unless you're forced to chump block with it, or your opponent kills it quicker. You know, and even if they do kill it, they're probably killing it with a spell, or at least the creature they've cast after this, maybe. So, yes, this is a huge card. Not quite as bomby, I think, as Niblet of Frost, but still very good card nonetheless. Although this makes me want to pick a lot of those death-touching rats from Shadows, if this is in the format, because those rats pair really well against this. Still, very good card in Limited. Next up, we have Assembled Alphas. 5 and a red for a 5/5 wolf creature, with whenever Assembled Alpha blocks or becomes blocked by a creature, it deals 3 damage to that creature and 3 damage to that creature's controller. This makes it an incredibly good aggressive or defensive creature. You know, it wants to get in there because if they don't block, it gets hit for 5, and if they do block, it's probably killing their defender unless it's got 8 or more toughness, because it's going to be doing a minimum of 8 damage to that creature, unless that creature has first strike, I guess, but it'd have to be a 5 power creature with first strike, and it also hits their controller anyway. This is, again, just a massive Limited bomb, especially since it can do both aggression and defense really, really well. I don't know what else to say, it's just so good for Limited. And finally, of the 5 intro pack rares, we've got Ulvenweld Observer. 4 green for a 6/6 creature tree folk, which means a friend of mine is going to absolutely love this for their commander deck. And whenever a creature you control with toughness 4 or greater dies, draw a card. This is probably the weakest of the cards for Limited, simply because it's so expensive a card. You're not going to be at a stage where you're going to have a whole board state at this point necessarily, and if you do, you're probably winning that game anyway. You know, this card itself doesn't really help me much win, because maybe the opponent's just going to kill you with flyers. Although I do think this might be a huge bomb rare in the Emerge deck, simply because it allows you to merge, get defensive creatures early, sacrifice them to emerge, and just draw more cards. So it might be a bomb in that kind of archetype, but I'm not so certain. It's very hard to evaluate this card. Drawing cards obviously is always very good, but it's really just, it doesn't really immediately affect the battlefield as much as some of these other cards, and that's my concern in terms of Limited. So finally we come to our final rare spoiler of the day, or our final spoiler of the day so far. Obviously I'm expecting some more tonight, because that's usually what happens to me in spoiler season. But anyway, this card is absolutely amazing, and is the continuation, by the way, of the Delver of Secrets storyline. So we had Delver of Secrets in the original Innistrad block, then we had that insect scientist guy, again, like the continuation of it in Shadows, and now we're continuing the story of him again with Docent of Perfection. 3 blue for a 5/4 insect horror with flying, which I believe was the final stats of the last one. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a 1/1 blue human wizard creature token onto the battlefield. Then, if you control 3 or more wizards, transform Docent of Perfection. It transforms into Final Iteration. a Eldrazi insect with flying, and wizards you control get +2/+1 and have flying. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, get a 1/1 blue human wizard creature token. I absolutely love this card, and while I wish this was standard playable, I accept it's probably just going to be limited to a limited bomb, but boy, what a limited bomb. If you get into that, like, blue-red archetype with Niblet of Frost and this, or even just this, or one of the, this is going to take over games so very, very quickly. It gives you a whole host of creatures, and if your opponent's not running much removal, those creatures very quickly turn into a swarm of flying army. It's just so good. Like, if he flips, you're now creating, he's alive, 3/2 flying creatures every time he casts a spell. That's incredibly powerful. I just love this card so much. So much. Oh, why did I not get to play standard when Delver of Secrets was around? I don't know. But yeah, no, that's all the spoilers we have for today. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and look out for more spoilers. Again, I'll be doing any spoilers I miss in tomorrow's video, unless we get a whole host of them in the next hour or two, in which case I'll probably just go and film another video for that as well. So thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.